recalls him blushing when they held hands and that shy guys are just her type. She then notes that putting his smile aside, this will be her last day selling herbs since she has plenty of money. Someone then calls for V and asks how she has been. The man says it has been ages as Eve says hello. She notes that this man is a regular customer who is knowledgeable in many things. He is also a merchant who travels to many regions that sometimes shares interesting stories. The man then asks V if she got what he asked for as she tells him she barely managed to find them. The man talks about how the tigers in the West are enjoying herbs now since vegetarianism is a new health craze. Eve notes some of the stories sound too amazing to be true. She tells him she packed lots this time as this is her last day of business to his shock. He tells her she cannot do this so suddenly and asks where he is gonna get his herbs from now, to which V says he'll have to find another way. He asks if that is all there is between them, to which she says yes, that is all. She then asks if he brought info, to which he asks if she is referring to the broker who can get her to the human world. The man then asks if V knows they have a new chief now. V asks if he means the chief of the north and that this happened a long time ago, so what about it? The man mentions this chief has been capturing brokers and notes that they are now cracking down on illegal entries more now. V is in shock as she wonders why now of all times, before the man says it won't be possible right now. He then asks if she has a lot of time and tells her to wait for things to be less strict. V notes to herself she does not have time before the man tells V he has a parting gift for her. He then hands her something wrapped in a cloth. She asks what it is, to which he says they are rare herbs you can't find anywhere nowadays. She asks if they are a non-monetizable substance, to which he says kind of. She calls him a lunatic, saying she does not need it as he says to watch out. He tells her she is more gullible than she looks as he places it in her basket. He tells her to try it out later as she will experience a whole new world. She says over her frozen dead body and that she'll get rid of it on her way back. He laughs, saying that are in the north so nobody could die of a heat stroke. Eve notes to herself she actually could get burned to death though. The man then says he is off and thanks her for everything. She waves as she stands in silence. Eve droops her head down and notes she thought she could leave right away since she's got all this money, but now there is a crackdown. She decides to just go home first. As she holds her basket, she runs, wondering if she'll have to take care of Rachel for a bit longer. She thinks about how she could save up even more money for the human world. She then notes that if she does do that, what would happen when Noer finds out she is a wolf hybrid. She shakes her head, telling herself to not think negatively and is sure there is a way. She then decides to look at her cuties first and forget about all this for now. She hears a creak to her shock as she then wonders why the door is like this. She yells, telling the kids she is back, but is then stunned. She calls for Rachel and Zion and drops the basket. She notes that they are gone and dashes out, hoping nothing has happened to them. Eve runs out shouting their names as she notes they are not in the woods nearby either. She then wonders if they went to the square. Eve notes that Rachel does not look like a northerner, so they will notice her immediately and must find Rachel quickly. She bolts off while saying please be their kids and runs off into the woods. In the bustling city, people are chattering. Eve then bumps into someone who tells her to watch where she is going. She ignores him as she notes the kids are not here. She notes they are not in the alley where she was with Rachel and not on the streets either. They are at this point nowhere to be found. She dashes again, wondering where they have gone, and notes she should have told them to be more careful. She then bumps into someone again before saying sorry, and the man asks if she is okay. The man then says Eve as she now looks up. She notes it is Noer who asks if something is wrong and if something happened. Eve is fully teary-eyed as she tells him the kids are missing, to his shock. She tells him she left them at home and internally yells that it is her fault. She notes that she was only thinking about money as she tells Noer they were nowhere to be seen when she came back. She finds herself to be the one responsible in the end. As she cries, she now shouts aloud, saying it is her fault, before Noer tells her to calm down first. She wipes her tears as she notes she has to pull herself together. She apologizes while bowing and says she will go look for the children as Noer says wait. She continues to bolt as he calls her name. As she runs, she internally tells the children to please be safe. We later see Zion shouting Ruby's name. He is clearly scared as he asks if she is sure they are in the right place. She tells him it was around here somewhere as Zion tells her he does not think it's here. The men behind them laugh as Zion pleads with her to go back. Rachel says they need to find Eve, but Zion says he is scared. She tells him not to cry as she hates crybabies, to which Zion says Eve likes men who cry. Rachel says that is what Eve likes and not what she likes. Zion can't form words anymore as he is teary-eyed. Rachel tells him to not follow every strange thing Eve likes as Zion shouts his sister is not strange. Rachel says she never said that but does note that Eve has a strange taste. Zion yells asking what is wrong with what Eve likes. Rachel asks who likes people that cry, to which Zion says at least 1 or 2 people in the world could like this. Rachel says her brother never cries as Zion says to not say mean things about his sister, to which Rachel asks when did she say that. The 2 men then chatter about what the kids are talking about as Rachel then says whoops. She notes she needs to be more careful and tells Zion that they should just go then. Zion then says he does not want to go with her anymore as she yells what. He says he is going to find Eve himself as Rachel shouts for him to stop right there. Huffing and puffing is heard as Rake notes that if Zion goes any further he'll attract attention in the middle of the square. She then says she has no choice and then starts to flare up. She tells him she said to stop as fire then surrounds Zion. The blaze causes him to jump as he notes this is the fire that he likes. Rachel, while tired, tells him she never said she hated Eve. Rachel says that she thinks her future sister-in-law is the best regardless of her tastes. Rachel then notes that this is better now and that she knew when it comes to sweet-talking wolves, fire is the best tool to use. Some creep now stands behind her as he says fire. Rachel turns in shock as she notes there was no one here before. The guy smirks before asking if she can control fire. She tells him he must be mistaken as he asks Rachel if she thinks he would not know just because she has a hood on. He also says that she did that as well while pointing to the fire. Zion says Ruby in fear as she tells him to stay behind her. She notes this man does not seem to be able to focus his eyes, so this could be really dangerous. She starts some fire as she tells him to mind his own business and go away. The man then jokes saying he is scared and asks if she is a dragon kid. She tells him not to come closer and that if he does not stop there she'll have to use this. The guy then spots the ring and says he has seen that before. The guy then recalls back to the man he saw last time as he then smirks. She laughs as the 2 kids stand in shock. He then says how dare a dragon come to the north before grabbing Rachel's collar. He asks what a filthy dragon like her wants to do. He then tells her to stay still and that the 2 of them are young so they will fetch a good price. Zion then yells no as he attacks, yelling to put Ruby down. The guy then says why you before smacking Zion to the ground. The guy then notices the ears and calls Zion a mongrel before noting how a dragon hanging out with a mongrel is a funny combination. Rachel says she must protect Zion but notes she cannot breathe. A flare can then be heard to the lunatic's shock. He shouts oh no as he is in flames. Zion yells for Ruby as we hear someone say how cocky of you. It is Noer who talks about how this man has the audacity to mess with little children. He steps forward as the children shout his name. Noer then reaches and grabs the back of the man's shirt. Noer then proceeds forward as the man shouts and tries to pat out the flames. Noer then kneels down with his cape fluttering as the 2 children stare. He starts to ask how they are as the man behind him calls for help and that it is hot. Noer then angrily wonders what he should do about this wolf who does not know his place. He notes that he is sure killing one wouldn't hurt. As the shouts can be heard, Noer then gets stunned. He hears hiccups as someone is patting his hand. Zion tells Noer to please stop and that he is scared. Noer starts to speak but Zion squeezes his finger harder. Noer then tells the 2 that he is sorry. He notes to himself that he is blinded by the slight peace he felt and he forgot the person who he truly is. He notes that he has always wanted to fight wolves as they are his natural enemy, but then wonders what if he frightens her as well. His heart throbs as he then feels pain and notes that it feels like his heart sank to the bottom of his stomach. The doofus notes that the flames have gone out before he yells that Noer tried to kill him. He yells asking how dare a dragon mess with a wolf and says that this means war. He tells them he is going to see the chief before he gets whacked unconscious. Noer notes it is a frozen apple as someone speaks about going to the chief. Eve then says how dare you and calls the dude a worthless piece of trash. Another whack can then be heard as the man hits the floor with a thud and Rachel yells for Eve. She grabs the guy calling him a lunatic and shakes him saying he messed with the wrong person. She tells him she knew he was trouble ever since she saw him buying that good stuff. She grabs the apple and says people like him deserve to die. Noer then tells her to calm down as he grabs the apple to her shock. She asks why he is stopping her, to which he says she is getting too worked up. She tells him that this man is better off dead as she tells Noer to let her go. Rachel then calls Zion's name. She then asks Zion if Eve has to be her sister-in-law, to which Zion asks what she means. Rachel blushes as she asks if Eve can just be her bride instead. Oh, so that's what we are doing now, huh? You know what? I'm throwing myself in the mix as well because the narrator also wants Eve to be his bride. Eve slumps over as she is panting and exhausted. Noer calls her name and then tells her to excuse him for a moment. He then asks if she is more relaxed now as he holds her head up. She now flinches after finally being out of the daze and then asks what she has done. Noer notes that he thinks she has finally calmed down now. He tells her he is sorry for touching her but he just wanted to help. She is bashful as she tells him it is fine and that she appreciates him helping here. We then hear Zion call for Eve and ask if she is alright. She yells his name as Zion is teary-eyed and looking for a hug. She grabs his shoulder before telling him she told him not to go out as he tells her he is sorry. She asks if he knows what great lengths she has gone to keep all this from happening. She clenches her teeth as she asks what if he got hurt. She asks if he knew how worried she was about him. Zion tells her he is sorry and that she should not cry. They then hug as Eve says she is so glad that he is safe. Eve then hears another individual calling her name. It is Rachel who says sorry and says that it is all her fault. She says she was the one who told Zion to come, to which Zion then says he was the one who asked Ruby. He says that he threw a tantrum and ran away as well. Eve then hugs the two of them and says that it's her fault as she should have never left them alone. Rachel then cries as she says it was all her fault because she said Eve has strange taste in men. Zion sobs as he says she never said that and that Ruby only said it was unique. Eve is still sniffling but is comically stunned by what the kids are saying. The two children then apologize to each other while they hug Eve. Things to note is that Rachel says she will get Noer to be better at crying and Zion says Eve does like strange boys and asks who in the world likes men that cry. Eve hugs them but does tell them to stop talking about this. We can also now see that Noer is laughing as well before he notices that she sees him. He apologizes and says that he just found this situation very amusing. Eve laughs as she notes to herself her tastes must actually be unique. She then tells all of them to stop crying and to go home. She tells them to say thank you to Noer before they go as Noer stands awkwardly. Zion hugs Noer and thanks him as they would be in big trouble had he not come. Noer tries to tell Zion that he should not be thanking him but then notices that his sister says thank you as well. She then says his name as Noer now has a grin and says her name. Rachel glances over as he now offers her a hug. Rachel then smiles as the siblings finally share a happy moment. Zion tells Eve he is hungry as she tells him they can get food while they are here and asks if he'd like anything. She turns to see Rachel and Noer going through a game plan or something. Noer says that Rachel forgot something in the alley to Eve's shock. Eve says she will go with Rachel and asks what she forgot. Rachel grins and says she will go with Noer as it is a secret. Noer says he will go with Rachel and tells Zion to go home first. The siblings hold hands as they rush away. Eve notes the two have grown closer as the dork from before asks what they are doing to him. He says they beat him up already and asks if that wasn't enough. It most definitely was not enough, you low-life idiot. Rachel says what he got before was payback for Zion and herself. She tells him that he now must pay for making her future sister-in-law sad. The man's cry of agony is quite satisfying. Later at the house we see Eve tucking the children to bed as someone asks if everything is alright. She then turns to see Noer and tells him they look so peaceful. Noer tells her that was not what he was asking as she confusingly says sorry. Noer says he wants to know if Eve is alright, which stuns her. He reaches his hands out as he tells her that her face is swollen. She feels it and tells him that she is fine. She notes that she was just so startled that she reacted without realizing before saying it was all her fault with a smile. Noer tells her it wasn't before he tells her that he feels like she is trying to carry everything on her shoulders. He tells her not to be too hard on herself for what happened with the kids and that she is doing more than enough for them. He crouches over as he tells her she was just trying to protect after all. As a narrator and as an honest person, I now take back my desire for Eve to be my bride, as Noer is the only man suitable for this prestigious honor in my eyes. They will make a fine couple that even the heavens envy. Noer now tells Eve that even if she says she is alright, maybe he could. Eve then springs up, interrupting him, thinking for a moment before saying she has to go get herbs. He calls her name as she dashes away and slams the door shut. The wind blows outside as Eve notes too many things happened today. She notes that she only feels this way since she was scared before. She notes that she is sure that is why her heart is pounding like crazy right now. She says she will go back in after relaxing a bit before letting out a loud sneeze. The next day we see Eve continue to sneeze as Rachel asks if she is alright. Eve notes she cannot believe she got a cold just from stepping outside and wonders how this could happen to a northerner like her. She tells them she is fine and that she is not going to die. Noer then tells Eve to excuse him for a moment as he reaches for her. He tells her that she has a high fever and that he should go get her medicine. She then tells him that there are medicinal herbs over there and that they just need to boil it. She apologizes for making a guess do this as he tells her no problem and that he will do it now. Zion says he wants to help as Rachel reminds him he cannot control fire, so she will help him. The group then wonder which one is it as someone mentions it could be the pretty plant. Eve's eyes close as she watches them talk about having never seen the blue plant before. One last blink and she is out cold. Later someone yells Eve multiple times and tells her to wake up. Noer tells her it is all done and to drink a bit before going back to sleep. She notes her head hurts so much as Noer tells her to drink it while it is warm and that it would make her feel better. As she sips, she then notes how disgusting it is. She wonders if it was always this bitter. Noer then helps her out and tells her to sleep some more and that he will put the rest on the table so she can drink it when she gets up later. He tells her that he and the children will go get clean water. Eve notes to herself that it may be due to her sickness, but a single touch from him makes her heart go back and forth between heaven and hell. He has his hand on her forehead as she notes it is so warm. As she felt his caring touch, she would then fall asleep again before she knew it. It is then noted that she had no idea what was going to happen to her. She blinks her eyes open as she wonders if she was asleep for a long time. She wonders if they brought water yet as her hand pats the blanket. She then holds up her hand wondering if this is hers. She then wonders what is with this tail. She says what the heck as she wonders if she turned into a wolf. The man from before really did give her that good non-monetizable stuff. The bed where Eve rests glistens with a white light. As she starts to get up, Eve wonders how long she's been out. Her tail wags as she wonders if her family is back with the water yet. As it continues to wag, she notes how soft somebody's tail is. That is until she starts to realize things. She grabs at the tail with her hand while in a state of shock. This then prompts her to stare at her hand, which has now become a paw. She then wonders if she has fully become a wolf as she sits stunned on top of her bed. She grabs at her face, noting how this cannot be true and that there's no way it's possible that she has suddenly transformed into an animal. She then tells herself that this must be a dream as she was very sleepy earlier. She then curls around in bed and tells herself to calm down. Eve says to herself that if she closes her eyes and counts to 10 then things should definitely return back to normal. The countdown begins as she begins to sweat and feel anxious. She finally has that get real with yourself moment as she tells herself there is no way this is a dream and that she is totally in denial. She wonders how the heck this even happened as her nose then catches a whiff of something in the air. She continues to sniff as she then realizes the scent is from the cup right next to her that is filled with that good stuff. She wonders if this cup was what caused everything that's happening to her, especially since the smell is awful and that she only realizes this now as her nose is no longer stuffy. She then definitely recalls telling Noer to use the herbs she had and him agreeing to that. Wolf Eve then hops from the bed as she notes the plants should not have had any side effects. She crawls up the seat and table as she wonders if he mixed something else into it. Atop the table she stares at a blue powder. This prompts her to wonder if Noer fed her those super rare herbs that one dealer gave her. She curses the dealer as she notes how he should have kept them for himself if that were that rare. Eve then wonders what she should do now. Ever since she remembered her former life, she has never fully transformed into a wolf. She wonders how she can turn back before wondering what if the dragons come back before she can revert to her human form. She imagines them becoming enraged at her for lying and notes that she'd be dead. She then starts to crawl and tells herself that she must get out of here first. She jumps at the door as she decides to return after the medicine has worn off. The issue is that she currently has paused, so opening the door becomes a real struggle. She continues to scratch and tap before it finally opens. Rachel starts to walk and saying she's sure Eve is asleep and that it's important to rest when you're sick. Eve is completely in disarray and she throws out a non-monetizable word. Rachel then notices her as Eve starts to look saddened. Chills can be felt as Rachel wonders who this is. Poor Eve starts to quiver and shake in fear as she wonders if Rachel ever made this expression before and if Rachel has realized who she is. Zion then walks in yelling Ruby. Zion calls this odd as Eve notes he probably won't know it's her either. Eve notes how they've lived deep in the woods together since he was born, so he's never seen any wolves or his sister in her wolf form either. Zion then starts to mention how the ears and the tail both look very familiar to him. Eve hopes he doesn't know it's her, but Zion starts to yell it is his sister before Rachel covers his mouth saying it is a puppy. Rachel says she recalls seeing one before and that this is definitely a puppy. Zion mentions how if she recalls seeing a puppy then that must mean her memory is back. Rachel glares at him in silence as Eve notes how perceptive her brother is today. Zion then says he wants to show the puppy to his sister before wondering where she is. Zion then starts to act like Light Yagami as he deduces how his sister is gone and how there is suddenly a puppy in the house. Eve internally yells at him to stop trying to solve things and how now is not the time to be clever. Zion seems to have gotten a boost in IQ as he notes how these two things must be connected. Eve now starts to act like a cute dog as she notes how this will no doubt distract him. Zion then shouts, yelling at how cute the puppy is, and pets it. Rachel is shocked and speechless. She then sighs, saying she knew it was a puppy, as Eve notes how she is almost hurt by how they're buying this. Rachel says that Eve likely stepped out to cool off since Eve must have felt hot from her cold. Zion says he sees, as Rachel then wonders what in the world Eve is thinking. Zion yells Ruby's name as he tells her to look at the puppy's toe beans. Eve is internally crying as she internally asks if her brother is enjoying this, especially since his sister must do all this squirming to avoid getting killed. Rachel then calls Zion a fool and says that is not important. She tells him that Noer will be back soon and asks what they should do. Eve then gasps as she notes how she was so focused on the kids she forgot about him. We then hear the man's voice as he tells the kids they got back before him. His boots can be seen as Eve calls him her final boss. His shadow descends on the house as Eve notes he has arrived. He then asks what that thing is doing here. "Excuse me, sir, but for your information, that thing is your future wife, by the way." Eve lets out a soft bark as she notes how screwed she is. She wonders if she should try acting cute before thinking about how Noer won't easily fall for it like the kids. She then trembles as she wonders what she needs to do. Rachel then shows up and hugs Eve as she tells Noer it is a puppy. Noer says what as Rachel says she will raise the puppy and tells him to not touch it. Rachel tells him that if he plans on living with her, he better not think this is just some ordinary puppy. Noer then calls Rachel's name as he wonders why she is behaving so strangely right now. Noer then internally says wait as he then starts to glance around wondering where Eve is. He notes how the table is a mess before seeing how her bed looks like she got up and left in a hurry. He then recalls how this puppy suddenly showed up as well. This causes him to jolt in shock as he wonders if this could mean what he thinks it means. Noer covers his mouth as Eve notes how his expression has gotten worse. Eve wonders if Noer will burst out in anger and cause trouble for even the kids as well. She then internally says no as she squirms. She tells herself she must do whatever she can to prevent that from happening. She stands firmly in front of Rachel and her brother as if protecting them like a good mother would. Look at Eve, man, so inspirational. As Eve stares at Noer, she feels chills running down her spine from fear. She has a gulp before moving her paw. She then taps his boots and goes full on Puss in Boots mode as she hopes that he will fall for her being cute trick just this once. We see twitching from Noer's face as Eve then whimpers, wondering if it worked. She then is in shambles as she cannot believe she will end up dying as a wolf. That is until she hears the words "how cute." Eve lets out a soft bark as Noer now kneels down, saying he finally is starting to see what Rachel means. He notes the color of the eyes and the sheen of its fur all remind him of a certain cuteness he's seen before. He then lets out a smile. Eve wonders if he really fell for it as he starts to pat her on the head. He then scratches her chin as Eve now appears very pleased and notes how she is fine with doing this if it means she can live. Noer himself chuckles as he notes how Eve did not have to go this far. He is then silent before telling Rachel he will be back after getting some firewood. Rachel asks what about the puppy, to which Noer smiles and tells her to take good care of it as it must be lost. Rachel then beams with a smile as she hugs on tightly to Eve. Rachel asks when he will be back, to which he tells her he won't be back soon as he must go far. He then mentions that it appears as though Eve has gone out for a walk and that he needs the two kids to watch the house. He tells them he shall be back as the door creaks closed. He stands outside in silence for a moment before slumping over, noting how he almost ended up being aggressive again. He looks like Sasuke in this frame as he notes how he cannot believe that the wolf is Eve. He also notes how he would have no doubt attacked if Rachel had not stopped him. For some reason they show us his nape before we see him seated on the stairs. Unlike my alcoholic dad, Noer starts to wonder what he should do to fix this rage issue that clouds his judgment. Noer also wonders what to do about the powers he cannot hide and his true feelings. From the inside, the door has closed quietly as both Eve and Rachel breathe a sigh of relief. Rachel tells Zion they should get to bed now as Zion asks why so soon as he still wants to play. Rachel says puppies need to go to bed early as she internally notes how Eve can revert back to normal more comfortably if everyone is asleep. She then tells Puppy Eve that it is time and pulls a blanket over them. Eve starts to lick Rachel as thanks since Rachel saved her life from Noer. Eve then sadly wonders how she can change back as the most pressing matters have all been dealt with now. She then starts to wonder what if she cannot revert back. That is until she starts to get sleepy while wondering if she is still feeling the effects of the medicine. She notes that she's sure everything will be okay if she just rests for a little bit. We can then see hair drifting in the air as we see the family peacefully sleeping together while Eve tells herself what a hectic day it has been. Side note, but where did the clothes come from, lol? The fire continues to burn and crackle at the fireplace as the three continue to snooze in bed. Noer comes in with a smile as he notes his girl is back to normal. He tucks her more carefully in the blanket as he notes she must have been startled when she suddenly changed into an animal. He then starts to note how adorable she looked then. He then sits in silence to himself before wondering how Eve would react if he told her he already knows she is a wolf. He wonders if she would run away. He notes how he at first used Rachel as an excuse to stay close to Eve and find out who she really was. He mentions that if she really is the wolf in the legend, then he must take his heart back from her. The gruesome scene of Noer standing over a dead wolf can be seen as he then notes that the more time he spends with Eve, when she would tell the kids to be careful and how she'd call him Noel and tell him to be careful as well, the more he feels emotions that he had never felt before. His heart throbs as he says he does not want to hurt her and truthfully just wants to stay beside her. As he sits in the room, he sadly notes that in order to do this he will need to do one thing. He must get her to choose him. Eve mentions how it is cold in bed as Noer notes he must become a man that she likes. He reaches over and touches her face as he notes he would warm her up as much as she wanted if only he could control his powers. Eve makes a noise as Noel pulls his hand back. Eve mumbles about how warm they felt before grabbing Noel's hand. He then gets pulled in and a plop can be heard. Noel blushes as he then notes how crazy his heart is beating right now. He covers his face as he feels like he's floating right now and also sinking at the same time. As he clasps her hands and in the midst of the chaos in his heart, he decides to pray to a God that he has never sought before. He tells God that if you truly exist, to please let him be the one Eve chooses and loves. Narrator interjection: but I feel so single right now. The birds chirp as Eve wonders if it is morning already. She yawns as she notes how everything feels much warmer than usual today. She then jolts in bed as she then wonders why it is warm. She awakens to see Noel, who has fallen asleep right by her bedside. She then blushes as she wonders why he is holding her hand. She wonders if he held her hand because it was cold last night before blushing even more and saying no way. She fumbles around looking for her ears and tail as she says she hopes he didn't see it. She then gets chills as she wonders if he held onto her hand so he could interrogate her when she wakes up. She then ponders on whether she should run away now as Noel seems to have risen up from his sleep. He calls her name as she nervously tells Noel good morning while pulling back her hand. He then grips onto her hand again as he asks if she is still cold. She says excuse me as he tells her that her body temperature dropped a lot after she went walking yesterday, so he was warming her up. Eve wonders what in the world he is saying before starting to realize that he must have thought she went out for a walk yesterday. He had gone to get firewood and by the time he came back Eve changed back to normal. Eve then gasps as she yells asking if she was the one who took his hand after getting cold, to which Noel nods. He nervously tells him that she is normally not like this and thanks him. Noel internally notes how cute she is. He then pulls on his cape as he tells her he will be going for now. Eve turns to Rachel and tells Rachel that since her memories are back she should go home with her brother. Rachel then glistens as she says she does not remember anything. Eve falls for it again but does not. This is odd as she pats Rachel's head and tells her she should stay here longer then. Eve then tells Noel she is sorry for the hand thing earlier, to which Noel says to not give it a thought but Eve insists it must have made him uncomfortable. She tells him if there is anything he needs help with she'd be happy to help. Noel asks if she really means that, to which Eve says as long as it is something she can do. He then leans over saying to pardon his forwardness and asks if she could please pat him on the head. Eve says pardon as Rachel starts to fangirl right behind them. Rachel wonders why he is being so forward all of the sudden but decides she should help him nonetheless. Rachel then yells saying Zion is calling for her, so she'll go back inside, to Eve's shock. Eve notes how it will be awkward with just her and Noel as Noel calls for Eve again. He asks if he can feel her touch as it causes the heat in his body to cool down. Eve notes how close he is to her as she mentions they should hold hands then. He tells her that is good too but mentions that it'd be more effective if she touched his head. He then slowly asks if patting his head is too much to ask as he holds onto his heart. Eve's heart explodes as she notes to herself how could she say no to a face like that. Noel looks down as he says it appears as though he was asking for too much. He continues to say that he was so taken by the memory of what happened last night as Eve then yells aw. She tells him to not talk about holding hands in such a strange way, especially since kids could get the wrong idea. She then yells saying she will pat his head before grabbing his face. She then asks if this is okay as Noel closes his eyes and nods. Eve notes how hard her heart is beating right now. Noel opens his eyes as he mentions the sight of a wolf whose heart is racing, and that is caressing the dragon chief must be a very strange sight to see. A bird's eye view of the scene can be seen from above as flowers bloom even though there's snow. A few days later we see Eve warning someone to make sure to never remove their hood in the square. The two children tell her yes with smiles on their faces. Eve notes that the incident from before only happened because she left the kids home alone. So to make sure they always stay by her side, Eve has decided to allow them to join her on her outings. Zion tugs at Eve's coat as he yells her name. He asks if they can go there, to which Eve asks if he means the bookstore. Eve then notes she could use this chance to stock up on some human world books. She tells Zion yes, but that he has to stay quiet, to which Zion yells he cannot wait. The door jingles as the kids scurry ahead of Eve, who notes they seem to be excited at just the sound of a bell. Eve hopes the kids' hoods won't slide off as something then catches her eyes. She runs over to some books as she notes how they sell adult novels here and wonders who the author is. This causes her to recall back to the novels she used to read before becoming Eve, and about how she liked reading about when male protagonists would cry over the heroine. Eve really is that weird lol, but in a cute way. Eve gulps as she notes how she could read just one and that she does have the time and money to read now anyways. She then slightly flexes to herself and says that she'll just buy it then since she's now rich and all. Eve then wonders why the shelves are so empty before noting how she does not see any human world books. She then clears her throat and asks the bookstore guy if the human world books are sold out, as she can't find them on any shelves. He turns to her and asks if she does not know yet. He tells her they have been banned for quite some time now, which stuns her. He places her purchase into a bag as he tells her the ban is due to many hybrids illegally moving to the human world. He mentions how he heard the king of the human world is furious and wants to tighten restrictions before the situation gets worse. The man then wonders if a human has ever come to this side, as Eve then notes how she was just happy a moment ago after buying this book. Now she has to wonder if she'll end up living in the North forever. Side note, but being stuck in the North forever sounds quite familiar if you know what I mean. Rachel seems to be looking on before we see her speechless face. Later at the house we see both Zion and Rachel laying down in bed as the door creaks, and Rachel notes how Eve was definitely talking about the human world in the store earlier. Her fire crackles as she wonders if this is what Eve meant when she was talking about moving out. Rachel notes that if Eve leaves she may never see her again. This causes her to decide she must stop Eve at all costs. She then summons a freaking phoenix as she tells it she has a request. She tells it to bring the book Eve bought earlier to her. Rachel notes that Eve bought it secretly, so it must definitely be about the move, so Rachel wants to see what Eve has in mind. As Rachel flips through the pages she notes how this is just an adult book. She then jolts and yells that she cannot believe this. She turns through the book as she wonders if Eve is really into this kind of stuff. She then tells the bird to take this part of the book and bring it to her brother Noel. She tells the bird that Noel must know this right away. The bird flies off in a blaze as Noel later grabs the paper while saying what? He shakes as he notes this is what Eve likes. Rachel really be out here exposing all of Eve's types and fetishes. We see a fancy castle as Noel notes to himself that he just decided to become the man Eve wanted. He then slams the table as he says damn it. He notes that he has been bending over backwards to become a man who looks beautiful while crying. He holds a book that contains 10 tear-jerking stories as Noel wonders what he can do to make himself cry. He notes that he has read dozens of sad stories that his men have brought him, but none of them have helped. A tap can then be heard at the window as he spots Rachel's phoenix. The bird bursts in through the window with a flare as Noel stands wondering if something has happened to Rachel. The bird carries a mirror-like thing that transmits a signal from Rachel. Rachel alerts him that Noel needs to know what Eve likes right now. Noel then flinches as he says what? He looks into a book as he notes this is what Eve's ideal man is. He notes that Eve likes beastly men, which happens to be the complete opposite of him. Noel then opens the door as he notes it appears that he should not have been practicing to cry all this time. He decides to verify this person as one of his men asks where he is going so late, to which Noel says the north. The aide asks if he is really going again as he has just returned. The aide says Noel can't as he has an important meeting tomorrow, to which Noel says he will be back soon and tells the guy to stop following him. A dragon can then be seen flying off from the estate as the aide wonders what in the world could be making the chief head for the north so often. Back at the snow-covered forest, Rachel and Zion are playing with a sled as Rachel tells Zion to go faster. Zion tells Eve to join them as Rachel agrees, saying they should all play together. Eve says no thanks and tells the pair to have fun as Eve notes she should have let him play outside sooner considering how happy they look now. Eve says as she notes she is actually a bit envious. She notes that she was looking to have some fun last night herself as she previously flipped through the book, noting how long it has been since she got to do this. She then yells what as she reads about a male hyena hybrid who talks about how his body was hot so he came all the way here to see the female lead. She trembles as she notes the hyena guy had bronze skin and thick facial features. She wonders what this is as this is completely the opposite of what she likes. She sits in disbelief as she notes it had been so long since she'd got to read an adult novel that she forgot to skim through it before buying it. She leans her head on the side as she notes a guy with a healthy body is fine, but she just prefers someone who is moodier. And if he's pretty then that's an extra 100 points. He likes his hands to be big but his fingers can't be thick. He has to have dark hair in contrast with his pale skin and a kind smile. In other words, Eve wants a guy to be like Noer, which causes her to jolt in shock at where her mind is wandering. She waves her hand as she blushes, wondering what she is thinking right now, and tells the evil spirits to get out of her head. A boom can then be heard suddenly behind her. She yells what as the wind whooshes right by her. She then sees and calls for Noer as he now notices her as well. She asks if they had an appointment today as Noer tells her not exactly. Noer stares at her as he notes how Zion definitely mentioned how Eve likes men that look beautiful when crying. He then notes to himself that the man in the illustration Rachel showed him was completely different from himself. He then unzips a button on his shirt as he decides he must test her. He then tells her that his body was so hot he could not sleep last night, so he came all the way here. Eve blushes and gleams as she says excuse me and asks what he said happened to his body. She turns her head as she wonders why he is suddenly like this. She then also mentions that this is the same line that was used in the book she read yesterday. She notes that this must be a coincidence and wonders if he is actually feeling hot. Noer then leans over as he tells Eve to please cool him down, which causes her to gasp. Eve then notes to herself that she cannot help the fact that she's a wolf. We see Zion yell at Rachel saying it is his turn, so she has to pull him. He asks if she is listening, to which Rachel wonders what her brother is doing. She wonders why he is like that after she gave him all that information. She notes that he could have made his skin bronze or something and wonders why he is acting so shy. She also notes how he still can't get the job done after all the help she has given and calls him a stupid lizard. Rachel is enraged and notes that if her brother is gonna be like this, then she'll have to marry Eve herself. Zion in the back mentions how Rachel is not even listening to him anymore. He then turns saying he's not going to play with her anymore and starts to walk away. He notes how she sometimes says things he does not understand and how Noer always wants to play with Eve. He halts as he notes how Eve used to always play with him, but now. He shakes his head to stop the tears as he says he knows how to play by himself. He continues to walk, saying they all better not beg to play with him later. He then stumbles upon something shiny, wondering what it is. He notes that it is pretty as a suspicious individual hides behind a tree. The creep stares at the kid and then lets out a giggle like he's EDP 445. Noel tells her to please cool him down as Eve then grabs his clothes and internally says no. She says she knows he is hot but tells him that he should not unbutton in front of children. Noel sweats as he wonders if she does not like him because he is not a beastly man. He says he is sorry before she touches his face. She mentions how last time he told her that touching his head was more effective, right? He then recalls he did say that, but mentions it was due to him getting jealous from all the kids who were getting pats on the head. He notes how she still remembers that as Eve asks how this is and if he is cooling off. This causes Noel to be in disbelief at himself for even testing such a kind woman, all just to find what her ideal type is. He now closes his eyes as he says this is nice. As this scene continues, he stands and feels very ashamed of himself. Eve then mentions that she hopes he feels better now as Noel tells her thank you. Eve then notices that she buttoned his shirt up in such a hurry, so she wants to fix it properly now. As she does so, she asks why he unbuttoned his shirt anyways and that he was blushing while doing so. Noel is at a loss for words as then blushes, says he was in a rush as it was so hot, and that this was very rude. He then says he apologizes as something has caught Eve's eye. He tells her he will be careful from now on and that if she doesn't like his blushing, he will work on that as well. Eve's heart beats more loudly as she internally asks her mom and dad what she should do, as she has found her ideal guy for the first time in her life. The only issue is that he turns out to be a dragon. Zion reaches for the ground as he wonders what this is. He holds the thing that looks like a red blood cell as he notes how pretty it is, much like Ruby's eyes, and how warm it is. He decides to take it back home as someone then says hello to him. Zion asks who are you as he tells Zion he is not a bad person, as Zion notes how strange his smile is. Zion recalls Eve telling him to be wary of people who smile for no reason, as she called this a villain's smile. Zion tells the guy his sister told him not to talk to strangers, as the man then says he knew it would not be this easy. He then sounds a lot like EDP as he notes how getting children to let their guard down around him happens to be his specialty. Zion stares as he says wow, as we see the guy has some green hair like Zoro. Zion then mentions that the guy's hair color has changed as the man asks if Zion likes it. He tells Zion it is his special ability as he is a chameleon hybrid. Zion asks what a chameleon is as the man questions if Zion really does not know what that is. He tells Zion they can freely change the color of their bodies, as Zion notes how amazing that is. The weirdo notes that he knew Zion would fall for this as Zion stares in awe. He then notes that it is time to carry out his mission. He asks Zion what he has in his hand as Zion says he found it here in the woods and that it is warm. The man mentions that Zion is right as it is warm before telling Zion that he is sure his sister would like it. Zion holds it thinking about Eve as the man notes how just a little bit more and Zion will be his. Yo, someone needs to call Chris Hansen right now. The man mentions how he knows a place where there are lots of things like that as Zion now hiccups. Tears drip down Zion's face as the man wonders why Zion is crying. The man notes he did not intend to make Zion cry as Zion talks about how his sister likes Ruby. The man asks who Ruby is as Zion mentions how his sister said she wants to hug Ruby every day because Ruby is warm. Zion would stand and stare from across the room as he whispers to himself that he is not cold. He would stare at his hand in sadness, before he now wonders if Eve would like him too if he had something like this. Zion cries saying Eve does not like him anymore and that likely giving her this won't make a difference. The man gets nervous as he notes how sad this story sounds and notes this is breaking his heart as he cries easily. The man then yells telling the little boy to not say that since his sister does not hate him, to which Zion says Eve likes Ruby more than him. The man replies by saying she loves Zion a lot and that he'll realize this once he grows up, to which Zion asks why he has to grow up to realize that. The man then mentions that is true and how someone should show they love somebody if they really do, as they will regret not doing so later on, to which Zion says that is right. Zion then blows his nose as the man then tells Zion to not hate his sister and that she may not express her love to him, but he is sure she loves Zion a lot. Zion says he understands as he mentions how he is feeling better thanks to the man, to which the man says that is good. The man then says he is sure his sister would like that warm gem if he gave it to her and that it would be good if Zion tells her how he feels after giving it to her. He mentions how it may hurt a bit though, as he now internally notes he may have made the kid cry, but it is not time to finish the job. His mission was to use the kid as bait to get closer to the woman. A group of people referred to him as Camille and told him to go handle this. Someone then asks if somebody is hurt, to which we now see Rachel and Camille yells miss. Rachel asks what he is doing here. She wonders why he is with Zion as well before asking Zion why he left without saying a word. She blames it on him that she is unable to see what is going on between Eve and Noel right now. Previously she was watching and noting how the atmosphere between the pair seemed to be getting better. It looks as though she might be falling for his timidness. Rachel then turns to tell Zion that his sister's type must not be hyena men then, before finally realizing that he is gone. This caused her to become furious as she notes how he might have not been able to help, but in addition to that he also left without saying a word as well. She then calls out how he is having fun with someone he just met while she was looking for him, to which Zion nervously says no. Rachel says he better have a good excuse, to which Zion nervously clasps his hand together as even Camille seems stunned. Rachel then calls Camille a traitor as Zion scurries over to her side. She asks who sent him here and then says to tell her everything he knows, which causes Camille to get nervous. Before he had arrived here, everyone was on pins and needles about how not only the young lady but even the captain was not returning from the north. Someone angrily mentions that the captain seems to be raising a pet in the north as another question if he means a wolf, and if they can trust this. The guy mentions that he is sure of it since the captain not only keeps going back to the north but now buys a lot of romance novels as well. The other men question if the captain really did that before someone yells at Camille telling him he must go to the north immediately. Camille wonders if someone is knocking at the door before someone chucks a book at him telling him that he should not sleep at the meeting. He is then told to secretly follow the captain on his next visit to the north, to which Camille asks, "What for?" The man then tells Camille to use this to approach the person that is close with their captain. It is a pearl that got purified by the captain's inner strength that is fatal to normal people. They mention that it has more power added to it to increase its detrimental effect and warn him not to let Rachel touch it as it shares the same attribute as her fire. The guy mentions that if the person their captain has met is qualified to be the chief's lifelong companion, then once she touches the gem she will absorb all of its powers into her body. Camille asks what if an unqualified person touches it, to which the guy mentions that of course the girl would then be unable to withstand the power that emulates from the gem and would be reduced to ashes. Camille notes to himself Rachel would be infuriated if he ever told her the full truth. He then tells Rachel that he apologizes, but he had no choice since the young lady and chief have not returned for so long. Rachel wonders to himself if they are going to use her brother's power to test Eve. This causes her to make an annoyed expression as she recalls how nice Eve has been to her and does not want to risk anything. She calls for Zion and tells him to give it to her. Zion asks if she means this thing as Rachel says yes, that thing, since it is very dangerous, so he'd better give it to her. Zion says yes as he then starts to hand it to her while Camille grabs his hair saying he can't do that. He notes about how the pearl's fire will collide with Rachel's flames before plucking it away from them since he does not want the young lady to be in jeopardy. Rachel asks what he is doing and demands it as he tries to keep it from her. She yells telling him she told him to give it to her as he notes if things go on like this she'll get it. He then decides the only option left is to swallow, as he does so with no hesitation. Rachel calls him an idiot as she yells for him to spit it out and to give it to her. As she chases him, she asks why he keeps running away. She mentions his life is at risk as the man notes it will be more dangerous if Rachel got her hands on it. Rachel then says she will have to resort to force if he won't listen, to which Camille says she can't. Just then it appears as though he has swallowed it as three of them stand awkwardly. She asks if he is crazy as she starts to note what would happen if he swallowed it. Camille shouts in agony as darkness seems to flow out of his mouth. He calls for Rachel and pleads with her to help him as Rachel notes to herself how scary this is. Camille mentions that since he swallowed her brother's power, he will die soon. Rachel then starts to feel immense fear that has just started flaring up inside her again. She starts to recall the nightmares she had of the old days in the north as voices ring in her head. She talks about how scared she is as she does not want to end up like that before her hand gets grabbed. She says Zion's name as she turns to him. He tells her to not be scared as he will protect her. Rachel notes he is trembling as well, yet he's still trying to help and protect her. This causes her to try and get calm, as if she becomes fully scared this will only put Zion in jeopardy. She tells Zion to get behind her as she then tells Camille that this may hurt a little. Suddenly something flies by the two kids and hits Camille's head as someone calls him a non-monetizable word. Camille falls back as Rachel wonders what was that just now. She stares at what looks like a frozen stone as someone mentions that somebody seems to be trying to destroy their peaceful life. Eve mentions how this jerk went this deep into the forest just to try and do that before telling Camille to not touch the kids.